Diane, I'm listening to a podcast, Black Lodge Trivia Night. I've never heard so many game aspirations in my life. Are we ready?
I am ready.
All right. Well, then let's give this a shot. Everyone, welcome back to Black Lodge Trivia Night. I am Art, and Matt is with me here. How you doing, Matt?
I'm doing great, Art. I've been so honking horned up for RPGs over the last couple of weeks. I know we've talked about it a couple times since then, but it's just like,
yeah,
Go ahead.
I was gonna say it's feverish. It's because I feel the same way. This has really been. I think we were saying like how we've had a really good start to the year.
Yeah,
and yeah, I 100% agree.
I saw a thing on Reddit, and it was like, "What RPGs are you looking forward to most?"
Mm-hmm.
There is so many new, like, just new things you would expect coming out. Let's just say like Pathfinder Player Core 2, just for example. Yeah, just
throwing out random.
Totally random. Yeah, right. But then even like all the Kickstarters that are delayed from like COVID shit, like those are starting to come out now.
Mm-hmm.
I am just fired up for a lot of things, and like I don't even know what to run next. I think we did finally narrow down on something.
Yeah. So let me quickly, not to drag this out, just one thing. What's one thing that's jumped out, horn-wise, Kickstarter, et cetera, et cetera?
Ooh, like you got to narrow it down. You got to like give me a category because I can like sci-fi, fantasy, Kickstarter, something out now.
Kickstarter. What's the Kickstarter that's jumped out at you?
Okay. Well, one, we already mentioned it. I'll just the Winter King.
Yes.
That looks amazing. We already talked about that one. I will briefly talk about how excited I am for Legends of Mist and the sci-fi Tokyo Outerscape that are coming out. Now, it took a long time for Tokyo Outerscape to be finished.
Right.
But it's supposedly coming out in June.
Nice.
So who knows when we actually get Legend and Mist. And what I have been reading is a lot of some of the issues have been fixed from City of Mist. City of the Mist looks amazing, but I think it was just kind of, it needed a little bit cleaning up, right? Who knows when we actually get these games? They look amazing. They're gorgeous.
Right.
But those are two, you can actually still go late pledge Tokyo Otherscape, which is obviously the cyberpunk setting.
Right.
Yeah.
So, give me the signal. Do I are these going on the list? Like, do I need to?
Not until they're out.
Okay.
Is what I've like settled on. Like, sure, I'll be able to maybe save a little bit or get like a really cool deluxe edition. I'm really trying to find a way to go like PDF friendly, so I don't have this anymore. It's like if PDFs, then I can just wait, and then I don't have FOMO. But man, those deluxe editions look really sweet. So yeah, list someday, but like I'm not personally backing these because I don't want to be in a Kickstarter for like 3 years.
Right. Now, the Mist one was one we were talking about earlier off scene. And I have to confess, like, I've seen the artwork. I've seen a lot of things about it that are just like, holy cow, that looks amazing. Right. I didn't understand the gameplay, but...
me neither.
Okay. Like, I watched somebody sort of demo it, and I'm like, I don't... But at the same time, like, everything else looks amazing, so I feel like I should just take a chance on it, because I have a feeling it's going to pop up here.
Let me give you one that I am actively going to do, and that is Dagger in the Heart, which is an adventure for Heart the City Beneath.
Right.
Which is, you basically are adventurers into like the core of a city, like underneath a city, with wild ass classes. And this is their like first full-fledged adventure for this. And this comes from the wonderful folks over at Rowan Deckard Cain, who did, there's no way you'll be able to see it, but back over there somewhere is Spire, which is something I want to play. So this is something I'm in on. Dagger in the Heart. We will see on the list.
Cool.
Heart, the RPG, in some form. It reminds me a lot of, did you ever read the Silo books? Like, not... That's like more sci-fi based and more like real. Kind of like that, like a whole city underground, and like the deeper you go, the weirder it gets, is kind of my impression with it. Anyways, very excited. They do excellent stuff, and this looks to be another just top-notch deal.
Nice. Very nice. All right. Okay, so there you go. That's the one quick hit.
Yeah, sorry. Then I gave like 3 or 4 things.
I will just say for mine, I just saw that
course.
the funding got collected for a Kickstarter called Sidewinder Recoiled, which is a Savage Worlds module. It's basically, Savage Worlds got its start with Deadlands, which is like, spooky Western, which is cool. And I know Patrick wants to run it. Sidewinder Recoiled is basically takes the spooky out, and it's basically like Tombstone for Savage Worlds, which, as everybody knows, my weirdness, like the idea of just like a straight up hardcore Western, I think sounds awesome. The spooky part, Deadlands, also sounds awesome, but I've always wanted a system for like just a straight up hardcore Western, and
our own little West world.
Yeah, and I think this might be it. So I'm hoping to
Very cool.
Get to check it out pretty soon. So
awesome, love it. Hope it makes it a list someday. Should
yes.
we take care of some business?
We should, yes. Did you want me to pull something up, or did you want to?
Of course I didn't.
Okay.
Unless you want me to.
No. I've got something here. I've got 2 things. They're both pretty quick, but they might both be pretty hard. So I figured I'd throw out 2. First one, little remote. James Hurley, everyone's favorite character.
Of course.
Has a mother that loves him. Maybe the only person. Oh, damn. What is his mother's job?
I'm not gonna get this. I'll guess like she works at the cannery for fish.
Yeah, I was about to say, like, taking a wild guess, you probably she's an author, I believe.
Whoa, okay.
Yeah. Second one, also specific, but maybe you might be able to pull it out.
Okay.
Twin Peaks, very evocative visuals. One of those visuals is a traffic light that blows in the stiff wind at night. That traffic light is at the intersection of 21 and...
Shoot. 21 and... No idea. Nothing. Maine? I don't know.
No. And so this is one of those things when I was like, there's no way I was going to get it. And then for some reason, when I saw the answer, I was like, that sounds familiar, but I never would. 21 in Sparkwood.
Nope.
Okay.
Nope.
So there you go.
Wouldn't have gotten it in a million guesses.
Yeah, I would not. But yeah, for some reason in my head, Sparkwood was like, yeah, that does seem right. But I would never have gotten
Deep cuts. Love it.
Yes. Yeah. So that's out of the way. Again, as you can probably tell, viewing audience, Patrick's not here. He's deep undercover this week, so he will not be joining us. And
he's method acting for our next 3 player
exactly
session.
Right. He's becoming a cobbler in Italy. So what we're going to do is we are going to, we started this with Cyberpunk Red. We had a great time, exploring a lot of little different things week to week when it was just the 2 of us, but that's a lot of work, and and we're lazy. So with Cyberpunk Red, we decided let's, start doing things one-on-one that could, bridge a couple of sessions and really get into some stuff. And now we're going to try Vaesen from Free League, which I will just say really quickly, when the Kickstarter came up, I passed. I was like,
I was going to say, this doesn't feel like an art thing. No offense to you, it's just like,
Yeah, I will say, like, I looked at it and I'm like, it's kind of different light now that we've talked about breaking up with systems. I said to myself, I have Call of Cthulhu, and that is more in line with what I think from this style of game. But now that I've read it and really explored this a little bit, there's room in our hearts for both, but I have come around to thinking this could be really fascinating.
Interesting you say that. And I mentioned before we started recording that I had some initial thoughts. Whereas in Call of Cthulhu, you're going to be investigating something. So something's going to go wrong, and you're going to be looking into it. Or like in Pathfinder, it's easy to envision your character. You're wielding a sword, you're casting spells, you're a druid, whatever. Like, it's easy to envision what your character is going to be doing, crawling through a dungeon, fighting guys, whatever. You can kind of do it in Call of Cthulhu, I think. Here, because I've only read the player stuff, and I read a little bit about mystery creation when I was doing another mystery game a long time ago. Like, I pulled some of that stuff from here, but I didn't look at any adventures. I've never listened to any actual plays about it. I don't I'm having a hard time envisioning like what my characters are going to do. So it's kind of exciting. Like, am I going to be fighting? Am I going to be investigating? Like, there's so many things I could be doing. Which is like, I'm excited. It's a good thing.
Right.
I just don't have that picture of like how this game actually plays yet, even though I've played lots of Mutant Year Zero stuff.
Yeah, and we should say, like, both of us have played, and you've run extensively Mutant Year Zero, but this is our first time with Vaesen specifically.
Yep.
There's a lot of
the lore.
The lore's amazing, especially for our Scandinavian fans out there, including the one in the room.
That's right.
And yeah, so, but to what you were saying, yeah, Call of Cthulhu, like you said, it's got a constraint, right? You know what it is when you go in, and this, even though you sort of have an idea of, you know, like if you read the lore in the background and the society, you sort of have an idea, but the book deliberately keeps things from the players that I feel like might guide the GM in a way to keep things maybe a touch more interesting. So
cool.
With that, yeah, let's give it a shot. So a few things for the people out there that don't know. The game involves, usually the main characters have something called the sight. The sight is something that allows you to see, as you can see on this, you know, beautifully animated back screen. You got Matt's character popping up. It allows you to see the other world that's going on parallel to ours. And that's sort of the hook for the PCs in this game, and it builds from there. So, Matt, why don't you tell us how you gained your sight?
Yeah, so Ernest grew up in Svalbard, which is north of where we'll be taking place in Sweden. And one night, a drunken ship captain, although it was not necessarily his fault, an ember from the smokestack of a steamer caused the great fire of Svalbard. And his family's home was one of the homes that burnt up. Now, fortunately for poor Ernest, he was saved. An unknown man came in and pulled him from the fiery inferno, and the man went in to go save his brother, mother, and father, and all of them perished. And the man was never identified. He was charged so bad, no one ever knew who it was. And Ernest's mother, much to his father's annoyance, practiced the old superstitions and habits. Every night on the hearth, she left a bit of the leftovers for the hearth spirits. She would leave seeds on the edge of their allotment as an offering for good crops every year. And so as the fiery blaze went up, the fire spirit from the hearth emerged. And at first, Ernest was terrified, but he could see like a look of like confusion on the spirit as it like dashed off to like go find another home. So like his first glance was just this harmful, like kind of common hearth spirit in the form of fire. And then that led him to want to understand these weird things that he saw more as he began to like see them more and more.
Very nice. I guess I should have mentioned this right off the bat. Usually we operate in Foundry. We're going to give Alchemy VTT a shot here, so you can see that up now. The setup's a little different. If you're used to watching our stuff, we usually have character sheets. Alchemy doesn't have character sheets per se. If you look in the bottom left corner of your screen, that's where Matt's going to do most of his playing from. It's a list of skills, his stats, actions. It sort of takes the character sheet and tries to condense it down into its most basic form, so you have exactly what you need. And there are mods that do this for Foundry for the major systems like D&D. I forget what it's called, but you can like everything becomes like a tiled series of menus. It works for Pathfinder too, so you don't actually need your character sheets, but I'm blanking on the name of the mod. But Alchemy is very much like a presentation first, as you can see from the lovely music, the animated backgrounds, the clean look, the lack of character sheet. Not that Matt doesn't have a character sheet. If you want to bring yours up really quickly, I know you did for a second there before I.
Yeah.
So there you go. It's very minimalist.
Here's my little description.
Yeah. So there you go. So just, you know, I should have said something beforehand. That's what you're going to be seeing tonight. Okay. So Matt, tell me, you know, how old was Ernest when he was spared this fire and he gained his sight?
What year is it now? Let me ask you
Let's see. The fire you're talking about was late 1880s, right?
Yeah, but
I guess it could be anything, right?
Right.
Let's say it's late 1800s.
Late 1800s. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So maybe that probably happened when he was a young teen, and he's 27 now. So
Okay.
I don't know, at least a dozen years ago. And in that time since, if you want me to go on, Ernest was adopted by a benefactor, as so many orphans in the 1800s were, who tried to impress upon him the value of like the classic arts. But Ernest just wanted to honor his mother's superstitions and traditions, which drove like this benefactor nuts, right? And then also explore them. So, he's wandering off in the woods. He's playing or trying to play with the little river sprites or something like that. And he ends up writing fiction. And much to the annoyance of his benefactor, he writes pulp fiction. He writes for weird science magazines. He writes mystery short stories that always involve some kind of supernatural, some kind of spirit, some kind of weird unknown. He actually becomes quite successful at it. And when he's old enough, when he's 18, he starts just moving around Sweden, oftentimes going up and down the coast and traveling around. Now, most people obviously see his fiction as completely ridiculous, but I think maybe he left a few too many clues, as he actually did have some kind of insight into the Vaesen. I kind of summarize him as Alan Wake in a less shittier version of Lovecraft. Much less shittier version. Like a non-shitbag version of H.P. Lovecraft.
Right. That's perfect. Now, do you feel like some of his success, whether people would be able to tell or not, is because he's actually more writing what he knows, where other fantasy authors are just have a layer of separation from it, because for them it's not real?
So he does two things. One, he uses the Vaesen to craft his stories, and then he also uses like the dark secrets of the upper crust that he's associated with through his benefactor. So like he's not afraid to he never uses real names, of course, but he'll throw people under the bus to oh shit, that's fucked up. I'm gonna use that for my story. Right. So he writes about his friends, acquaintances, and then he uses the Vaesen as all of his mysteries start at the root of the Vaesen and the things he's experienced.
Very nice. So now let me ask you a question. Your site came when you were a teen.
Yeah.
It's been at least a dozen years or so, as you mentioned.
Uh-huh.
What is it about now that suddenly has you more interested in looking into this site where you haven't before as you traveled and wrote?
Maybe a little concern. Curiosity. He thinks the world is misunderstanding Vaesen. Again, his mother pressed upon him the importance of respecting the spirits in the folklore of old, and that there was value there, and now he sees there actually was value. In cold winters, they never ran out of hot embers, or the fireplace never went out, right? And he always, he chalks that up to we always, less scraps for the hearth spirits, that type of thing. And there's been recent attacks that he's looked into that obviously aren't reported as such in the real news, but the rumors are giants attacking in Finland. So he went to go understand what is causing this, because why are the spirits hostile? And so he's trying to understand and also document. He's very curious. He wants to learn more about them.
Nice. All right. So one of the things that, again, as we were saying in Vaesen, as part of the lore, certain people get the site. Also, sort of, I don't want to say it's true folklore, but it's a thing that's, in the past that's sort of gone under and is not really talked about or seen anymore. Something called the Society. Originally a group called, was it the Thursday's Children? I believe that we're a group of people that sort of, had the site, back in the days of people telling, stories about this. And they would form groups, and they, tried to deal with the folklore. They tried to deal with the Vaesen. but over time that's just something of the past and it's sort of disappeared. But Matt, your character probably, since you have the site, would probably have heard some history of the children of the Thursday's children and the society. But tell me, how do you sort of start your search for finding out more concretely about the site? How would you maybe go about, how would Ernest maybe
it was definitely like a mysterious letter, right? Like I imagine it like we cut above like the shores outside. Where are we at, by the way? It's Uppsala, right?
We're going where we won't necessarily have to start in Uppsala, but we're going to end up there. But where would you be when you start figuring some of this stuff out?
So probably home in Svalbard. Like maybe that's like where my benefactor is, and maybe that's like where his estate is, and maybe he's like super old now or something like that. So I haven't inherited everything yet. I don't have unlimited resources, but I would be his only heir. I imagine like me leaning like up at the front of a steamer, reading this mysterious letter, like, "Dear Mr. Anderson," then like kind of summarizing some of my works, like your most recent article in Strange Tales, the October 1888 edition, has come to our attention, and like basically them saying, you seem to know more than what you lead on. If you wish to know the truth, maybe something like mysterious like that. And of course, the address being the society's address is like what I had in mind. I don't know if you were thinking something different.
Let's tweak it just a little bit.
Sure.
Let's say they give you a name.
Okay.
And
nice.
the name
so
is,
they sign a letter, maybe?
Yeah, maybe. Yes. It's signed Linny Elfenclint. And she's a big fan of your
Rolls
work.
off the tongue.
Yeah, Linny Elfenclint. And she's a big fan of your work. And you see that and she sort of writes things in the letter that make you wonder, like, she doesn't seem to be just writing this as a fan, right?
Right, maybe she validates herself something, because it's normally like, oh boy, more fan mail, which he doesn't get a lot.
Right.
I mean, he's a successful weird fiction writer, but that's like saying you're like a successful like pog collector or something like that.
Shots fired.
Want to see my slammers?
Cool. Okay, so we have
those that don't know.
Yeah, if you could just break that down for a second. The floor is yours.
Oh no, I'm not gonna break it down.
Okay,
no. Look it up. Google it.
So yeah, Linny Elfenclint signs it as a fan, and you see that the return address is indeed from Uppsala. Now, here's a question: how do I make you see what I'm seeing?
Can you like right-click the scene or whatever by any chance?
Well, what I'd like you to do is, if you look right next to the word party, there's three things. Is one of those tactical mode?
Nope.
The other way. Right next to the word party, right there.
Oh, yeah.
Click tactical mode. So there you go. That is our map of the Mythic North. And so what we're going to be doing is we're going to
just Sundsvall. I kept saying Svalbard. Sundsvall is where the fire was. So I'm like, home is up here for me. But
okay. I see it right there. Yeah.
Yep.
And if you don't know, if you hold left click, that'll ping.
Nice. Very good.
Very good. And we're going to be going to Uppsala, which is right there. That is where
outside of Stockholm. Whoops.
Yes, it's right outside of Stockholm, and that is where the return address is for Linny Elfenclint. And so, what would you like to do?
So I probably take a steamer to Stockholm, and then I'm sure it's via carriage, or I don't know, like how. I guess real quick, tell me a little bit about this world. Meaning, like, do we have airships? Like, is it real, or am I like thinking? Should I think just our technology, just with monsters?
It's that. It's the Industrial Revolution. Yeah, I'm sorry, all the dirigible fan fiction gone. But yeah, it's basically our world, but there is this, mystical fairy tale horror element to it.
Okay, cool. So I arrive in Stockholm. What time of year is it?
It's going to be late fall. It's definitely chilly.
Oh, baby, I love it.
Yeah.
Yes. I have a pipe. And so he anxiously, I wouldn't say nervously, anxiously, he doesn't like the pipe in the carriage, but all the way from Stockholm to Uppsala, he is anxiously, gnawing on his pipe, and he takes his carriage and up to Uppsala, which I'm sure he's been to Uppsala, but maybe not spent a lot of time there. I don't know how many people live there in the 1800s, but
right. All right. So you make your way to Uppsala, and apologies to all the fans out there. I don't know how to say any of these words, so it's going to be brutal. So one question I was trying to figure out was, like, in other VTTs, I could force you to go to the map that I'm looking at. I didn't see a way to do that here, but I'm just going to ask Matt to do things if I can't figure it out. So Matt, you arrive in Uppsala. Have you been here before as part of your travels, or is this pretty new? I mean, it's near Stockholm. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I've been to Uppsala, but maybe not like completely familiar with the area.
Okay, so why don't you give me, let's do a roll. Give me an investigation roll, and I want you to give yourself a +1. Now, for the people at home, when I say a +1, it's not a +1 to the total. This game is a D6 die pool, so when I say a +1, that's giving him an extra 6. 6s are successes, 1s are failures, everything else is kind of meh. You will need to get usually at least 1 success that's 1 6. So go ahead and give me an
let me check. So investigation is, just real quick, so is based off logic. I have 1 in investigation. I should normally be rolling 5 dice, but you said +1, so I'm going to click investigation over here. I'm going to edit, and I'm going to hit +1 to see what happens here. Oh no, that did something different. That changes it.
It changes the permanently. Okay, so
well, I have a success, so I would roll 1 more. I don't know how to add 1 temporarily, but
okay. Yeah, we'll have to figure that out.
Is 1 success enough, or should I go ahead and roll?
No,
to see
1 success is plenty. So basically, it's just if you want to roll it just to see if you get an extra 1. So yeah, with that 1 success, basically you. Interesting. Okay, so good to know. So yeah, with that, you don't have too much trouble. Like, your memory comes back to you, like, oh yeah, I'm sort of familiar with this. I know if I ask here, I'll sort of track down this address, and eventually you find the address, and the address is just like, Uppsala is not like the massive industrial city like, London at the time, but it's got, say, it looks like it's pretty close. Maybe it's got something going on with like the inlet here with the water. It's got some kind of industry. And so this is just sort of like a building that's been run down, and it's sort of crushed between a couple of larger buildings. And it's sort of like a door that's, half marked down like a broken, muddy alleyway.
Okay.
And you find the door there on the ground floor.
All right, so I pick up the knocker. Donk, donk, donk.
There's no answer immediately.
So he steps back, and he does the thing where he like looks around the street, like sees if anyone's there, and he looks up at the building. Okay. He gives it 1 more thunk, 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 and if there's no response, he'll wait for a response. But if there's no response, he'll just open the door.
Okay, yeah. So the thunk, 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 and you can tell it's like it's really reverberating, and it's going through the brick, in the walls, and so after a minute, like one of the windows, on the second floor kind of slides open, and someone sticks their head out. And they're like, and you see like sort of an older, woman, gray hair, not necessarily too clean. She's like, "Who are you looking for, love?"
I'm so sorry. And he like pulls out his stopwatch, and he's like, "I was supposed to meet a Miss, was it Elfin Clint?"
Yeah, Elfin Clint. Let's see if you get that message.
Elfin Clint. Okay. Yeah, I wrote it down. I'm gonna Elfin Clint. Good afternoon. I am supposed to be meeting a Miss Elfin Clint here. Is this the? Did she give me a name for the building, or he'll like spout out the address or something like that?
Yeah. And she's like, "Oh, love, yeah, no, you have the right place. But poor Linny, she's not always entirely well. She spends most of the time during the days, at the hospital, at the asylum, and getting her treatment."
Is that volunteering, or treatment.
Yes, they look after her a little bit. You know, she's not entirely well. She tells these stories, these fantastical stories, and she's not she's not quite right. And so
he pauses for a second, like, oh my gosh, I've decided to meet this is not a safe situation I am in. Did she leave any instructions?
No. I mean, she's probably there right now. The asylum's not hard to find. It's just, the very big building. If you go towards the water a little bit and turn left, you can't miss it.
He pulls out his stopwatch again. Well, the things I do for my fans. And she has like no idea who he is.
She's like, huh, okay. And she slams the window down.
Now, was she in the building, or was she like the next door neighbor, or like someone across the street?
In my head, I pictured her being like the apartment above. So she sort of hears you knocking right below, and she sticks her head down.
Is this not the society? So like, okay, so like,
it is not the society.
This is not the society's building?
No.
Okay, because like Ernest definitely thought he was going, like, maybe she like told him, like,
right, maybe
just a little bit. So he's like, oh my gosh, there's gonna be like an observation. I wonder if they have a telescope, like already, like, like early adoptions telescope. And then is like, oh, this is a first floor apartment with an old lady living above it. So, and he's like ready to ask a million more questions, but I'm sure the window is already shut. Yeah. And he embarrassedly, even though like no one's around, like walks down the steps, picks up his bags, and makes a long trek down to the mental hospital.
All right. So the mental hospital has big iron gates at the front of it, and sort of like a brick wall that's probably twice your height.
Looks haunted as fuck.
You know it. And
leaves sweep across the path up.
Right. And so, let's say it's like mid-October, and it's getting quite chilly already in this part of the world. And yeah, so you make your way up to the front gate, and the gate, it's not like they're trying to
his collar up a little bit, pulls in his coat.
Nice. And yeah, I mean, you're able, if you want to, just to walk right in.
Sure, I'll walk in. Is there like a reception area?
Yeah, so you come in, and it's sort of like the thing where like electricity is like partially gotten to this part of the city, but there's still a lot of like oil burning lamps over here, like a sconce over there. You can hear water sort of dripping through a leaking roof.
Lovely.
Yeah, you can't.
Only the finest in 1800s mental health care.
Right. And yeah, and you can just see like, like a team of like, say, 3 nurses at a desk nearby the front door.
Good afternoon. It is. The weather's certainly starting to turn. Hello. My name is Mr. Anderson. I have an appointment with Miss Elfinclint, please.
And they recognize the name, and they kind of smile like, oh, do you? Almost like that's adorable.
Yes. I believe we were supposed to meet just up the street, but her very kind neighbor directed me here.
And their nod is like, she is very kind. She makes sure that Linny gets here sometimes when she can't find her way.
And he starts to see like, are they kind of giving off the vibe like, I'm not going to be able to talk to her? No, they're just okay. They're just sort of amused that you have an appointment because they know her. Okay. So would it be possible to perhaps meet with her? Maybe if she has a cardigan or sweater, I could take her for a walk around the grounds. It's cooling, but I think maybe she'd enjoy some fresh air.
And they're like, oh, Mr. Anderson, I'll take you right to her. And so, they sort of lead you down a couple of corridors, and there's sometimes someone talking to themselves, sometimes someone just like screams all of a sudden, sometimes somebody just shuffles out of their room and walks down the hall.
Oh, it's a complete shit show, I'm sure. Like I have no illusions of like what a mental hospital looks like in 1890.
Yeah. And so eventually they take you to what might have been at one point like a grand ballroom.
Oh, creepy.
50 years ago, but it's not that anymore.
course not.
And there's just a woman sitting by, like, it had like really tall, almost floor to ceiling windows, an old chandelier that hasn't worked in decades. And she's just sort of sitting as close as she can to the window. And you can see her lips just sort of in a trace of movement.
Is she the only one in this giant ass ballroom?
Yes.
That's as a purveyor of the odd, Ernest is a little concerned, especially since like maybe the nurse has left him in here alone.
Yeah, just there you go, sir.
And he makes the like he clears his throat and makes the last like 50 very noisy steps over to her. Miss Elfin Clint.
And you feel like it's not that she doesn't see you, it's just that she's finishing what she's saying before she turns. And
do I recognize, like, I'll try to listen in before she pays attention to me. Do I recognize what she's saying, or am I able to make out what she's saying?
Let's take a look.
Okay.
Give me an observation roll.
Oh, no successes.
Okay. Would you like to push that, or?
No.
Okay.
So the consequence, yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, so for the listeners, if you fail your roll in Mutiny or Zero Engines, you can often push them. Pushing them comes with a consequence, though. And in this case, the consequences are a little different, right, Matt? Is that?
The consequence is you take a status effect either to mental or physical. There's a couple different ones. You could be angry. You could be exhausted for physical, and they apply a negative modifier to the trait that it affects. So if something affects your logic, you'll have -1 to all your logic rolls, things like that. So it's not too different than Dragomane, which we talked about last episode, of course. It's just instead of boons and banes, now you're getting die roll modifiers.
Exactly, yeah.
And it's after you push. So if you push, you get your full stats. It's going forward after you push it that you get the negative consequence.
Yes.
So you can do a thing where like you're gonna die, and it's like my last ditch effort. I shoot at him and get it, and then die,
and then break. Yeah.
This will be interesting. My mouse just died. Nope, never mind.
We're back.
We're back, baby. Sorry, proceed.
All right. So Linny Elfin-Clint, you don't quite catch
right.
right. She it's sort of, and you don't quite catch it on your way over. And then she sort of, can see your reflection coming in the window. And then she turns to you and says, "Oh, hello, sir."
Sorry to interrupt. Am I interrupt? No, he'd rather say like he's more curious. Like, am I interrupting something?
And she's like, No, of course not.
Oh, okay. May I? Can I take a seat?
And she's like, Of course, good sir.
My name, as you may be aware, is Ernest Anderson, and I'm in receipt of your letter.
And you can see her face lighting up. And she's like, "You got my letter."
I did. Now, you must understand, I'm sure you understand, that this is most peculiar, most unusual. And normally, I am far too busy for this type of thing. But a couple of things in your letter did draw my attention. And he looks around, again, giant ballroom, and you'd hear anyone from like miles away.
Right.
He's like, he double checks to make sure. You provided a certain level of detail that seems to indicate to me that you may know what you're talking about. And he extends a hand and he says, "Miss Elfin-Clint, it is a pleasure to meet you."
And she takes it, and you can just see like there's something about this interaction that's taking like decades off of her, making her decades younger, right? Like,
oh, nice.
Yeah. She just has perked up a little bit.
She's the old lady from Titanic.
Yes, yeah. And she and she throws the jewel in the ocean. And everyone's like, "The fuck are you doing?"
Hey, I have to pause because it is my battery's going out.
Okay.
And that'd be really weird since I'm driving. I'll be right back.
Sure. So while he's doing that, I'm going to try and figure out how do I send. So, like in Foundry, if you are familiar with that from whatever watching it, I can dictate, like, hey, we're going to go over to this map now. We're going to go over here now. I'm kind of curious, like, do I just have to ask people to go to tactical mode? Or is there a way to, force it when when it's appropriate? It's very interesting. This is our first time using Alchemy. And there are aspects of it that I truly enjoy. But I also will say that there are some things I don't quite yet understand. So I hope you can bear with us. And maybe when our intention is to run this adventure in Alchemy, unless there's something that comes out there like, okay, because Alchemy is still relatively new in its release, as are the systems for it. So if we realize, okay, maybe this part still needs a little bit more work, we could very easily bring it over to Foundry and continue it from there. But our hope is to do the whole thing here in Alchemy and really put it through its paces and see how it goes. And Matt is back.
I should ask for my mouse batteries, like, hey, what batteries are you using in your fucking smoke detector?
Because they last for goddamn ever.
I don't know if you've noticed, listeners. It's still going.
Yeah, no. Scientists invented fusion for my smoke detector, but just that.
Right.
Yes.
So sorry about that, but like if I'm driving Alchemy, if we're recording my screen, then I probably need a mouse.
Yeah. And I'll be curious to see if there's a way to. Maybe it's not so important that I can say, force you into tactical mode. Maybe, but the scenes. Hopefully, when I change scenes, it's sort of.
Oh, I'd imagine.
Yeah.
So, but yeah.
Anyway, yeah, we. So I'm sorry. So yeah, she.
You were saying she's like this de-ages her, like just like her, maybe her mental like awareness.
Yes, yeah. And you were saying that she indicated things in her letters that made her sound like she knows what she's talking about. And she sort of looks at you for a moment, and she's like, "Oh no, good sir. The things you write in your stories tell me that you know what you're talking about."
And he looks up from the letter, like he had pulled it out of his pocket. And he looks up and he just like smirks at her. And he's like, I suspected there may be a reader or two who knew the truth behind my. And he smirks at the idea of at fiction when he says fiction.
Right. And as you're sitting there, she doesn't respond for a moment, but you see that while you were speaking, she was sort of looking in your eye like a normal person. As you were finishing your sentence, she sort of like started looking over your shoulder and just sort of focused her attention that way out the window.
Out the window. Okay.
Yeah.
So he'll peek out like to see
Yeah.
what he sees. And I'd imagine like after a dozen or so plus years of interacting with these things, like maybe my sight isn't as honed as someone who's 90 or whatever, but maybe I have the skill. Like, do I see anything out the window?
Let's there's an observation skill, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, give me an observation skill.
2 successes.
Very nice. Yeah, you see sort of like, so in the background, the ballroom overlooks what probably at one point was like a garden, big, like fountains, a stone thing, all that kind of stuff. All of it's, completely overgrown, falling apart, half dead, crumbling. But around the edge of the property is like a little bit of trees, one of the few places that maybe a small forest still exists in Uppsala. And you see sort of like a spirit sort of going through the edge of the tree line. And you just sort of look at Linny, and she's just sort of watching it sort of float between the trees, and then it just sort of goes into the fog and you lose track of it.
Nice. I imagine it was like you said float, but maybe something like sprung between trees. Like I imagine like almost a garden gnome-esque looking thing, and it had like a little knapsack tied on a stick, and all that stuff.
Yeah.
Like in my mind, Vaesen are both these things of folklore and these potentially terrifying creatures. You know, if you don't eat your vegetables, then this werewolf-esque thing is going to come take you from your bed, or like if you open your eyes, there was an old creepy movie, like if you open your eyes when the tooth fairy comes, right, then like she's gonna take you, like things like that. But then also it's these like harmless, this is what Ernest has come to find, it's also this blend of like harmless folklore and things that generally will look out for humans if there's like an exchange. And so he's kind of maybe used to like these little forest gnomes or whatever spirits, that are like playful and mischievous but won't do any harm. And so he makes a little smile. Okay. And he'll even say to her like, wonder what trouble he's off to get into.
And with that, she sort of closes her eyes and smiles, and she's like, I knew it was true. You can see them.
Absolutely.
And she sort of, gently, puts her hand on top of yours, and she says, dear, there's so few of us left. And, you can sort of see, you walked in the room, she was sort of whispering to herself, she's been, a little manic when she realized who you were, but now she sort of has some lucidity come to her eyes. And when she's saying like, there's so few of us left, and she touches your hand, and she says, we have to protect that gift. We have to protect that gift. And sort of nods, solemnly.
Miss Elfington, I agree. I hope you share the sentiment that we also must protect them. It is refreshing to be here in Uppsala after some time in Stockholm, where you have to really seek out the spirits. Would I refer to them as Vaesen? Like, is that like what I would call them, or maybe?
I think
maybe
so.
Okay.
Yeah. For now, let's. Maybe, I believe that's correct, but just in case. But for now, let's do that. Yeah.
Yeah. He just like Stockholm just feels so void of life, and of course Stockholm is like now a bustling metropolis, and like to say it's void of life is for anyone else would be weird.
But she knows what you mean. She gets it.
Yeah.
And she's like, oh dear, you are so, and she's like, and I feel like that's becoming the case all over Europe. The life is being extinguished from our home. And she also is like, and I'm so glad to hear that you say we must, we have to protect that. It's not that change is always so bad, but change can be so destructive, and there are people who want to help with that destruction, and I don't understand why the change has to bring that destruction. I don't understand. And again, she's still got her hand, and maybe with that she even gets like a little misty, in her eye, and you can see that she's sort of going to a place long ago, and maybe something specific is triggered in her memory. But sorry, go ahead.
He'll say like, Lenny, dear Lenny, genuinely, I fear that something is out of balance. I don't know if you recently heard about the attacks in Finland, but I personally looked into them, and I fear that the rumors are true now. Of course, the radicals in Finland have come up with an excuse to write for the papers, but giants attacking people out in the open, something is not right.
She's like, you are so correct. There was a time when, we could be in harmony. And while I fear that time is slipping away, I don't feel that time is lost. And we must do what we can, because as you said, like, this isn't right. This isn't the way it was, centuries ago. This, a time we were in harmony.
And he says, well, there's so few of us who still keep the old traditions, the old superstitions. I am very flattered by your letter, and it is truly a pleasure to meet you. I wish we had met so many years ago, but I don't. I wish I knew why you summoned me here. How could I possibly be of assistance when I tell most people the things I do, they just think I'm superstitious?
And with that, she sort of starts to laugh a little bit, and the lucidness you saw in her eyes has slipped away. And she's like, "Oh dear, dear, dear! I cannot believe the author, Mr. Anderson, is here. I can't believe it." And she's like, "Well, I'm glad you came, and I've got a little present for you."
I must say, Miss Elfin Clint, even these fleeting moments we've spent together, the pleasure is truly all mine.
And she says, "Oh dear, I'm so glad you responded to my letter, and I wasn't expecting this. This is so wonderful that you had the time, and I'm so relieved to know that for once, it's been a long time, but for once, old Lenny Elfin Clint was right. Those days don't always come as frequently as they used to. So, thank you for that, sir." And she's like, "Oh, but I just said I had a gift for you. Let me get that for you." And, she sort of like, looks like she's running her tongue along her teeth. And she sort of narrows down whatever she's doing to sort of the upper back left of her mouth. And then she takes her fingers and she sticks them deep inside the back of her mouth. And you see her really, really moving something around. And all of a sudden she goes, "Ha ha!" She cries out in some pain and she gives it a twist. And she pulls out one of her back teeth. And it's got a little, blood on it. It's not in good shape, by any of today's standards. And so it's a little bit rotted. You can tell that just by looking at it.
And Ernest is seriously considering taking back like everything he just said, but he keeps his composure and remains the gentleman, but he's just like, good God.
And she's like, she's almost crying a little bit. You could tell like it did hurt. It didn't come out completely cleanly. And she's like, take this and, bring this to my dear friend at the Castle Seilenkreuz, and tell them it's from Linny, and that he should welcome you. And
Castle Seilenkreuz. What is your friend's name?
And she's like, "Oh dear, oh dear, it's Mr. Frisk. Mr. Frisk. He will help you at the Castle Seilenkreuz."
Say that all sounds lovely, and before I'm in no hurry. Should we enjoy a cup of tea? We don't have to like role play it, but like he's not gonna like ghost her,
right? Yeah, I mean, and she's like, "Oh dear, I would love that. I mean, there is still a little bit of light. If you wouldn't mind having a cup of tea with me, you could probably still get over to the castle by nightfall. That would be lovely, sir. I so do appreciate that."
Wonderful. So he does that and like makes, I don't know, like he like tells her like some stories like, I was up in the I don't know, pick a spot on the map here. Like I was up on the coast of Skelestad, a small village. And you wouldn't believe the things I saw. They thought they would be haunted by werewolves, and oh man, it was just the most little mischievous little garden gnome. Anyways, he's like, they're like laughing and stuff, and maybe they're talking it up, and he pulls out his watch, right, and then maybe it's starting to get like dusk or something like that. But maybe the light's just starting to turn, and he says, "Lenny, my dear friend, it has been truly a wonderful afternoon, and I will call upon your friend, Mr. Frisk. Is there anything else you can impart upon me, or I promise, would you like me to come back tomorrow and maybe bring you to the castle after I meet with Mr. Frisk?"
Oh, and she's like, "Oh dear, that would be lovely, but honestly, I don't think so. That's not my place anymore. And before you go, just understand, be careful. it's not just the Vaesen that are starting to turn. People were turning on each other as well, and the dangers are now coming from all sides. So please, sir, you're such a dear. You've been so kind to me. I would hate to think of anything happening to you. So please be careful.
Lenny, thank you. I will call upon you. I will not forget you, and I will be back. So many stories that we can impart upon each other. Truly a pleasure. By the way, do you want to know the twist in my next upcoming?
And she, oh yes, absolutely.
He bends down and he whispers in her ear, and he's like, the stableman. That's all he says.
And she's like, oh, I cannot wait to read it. I look forward to your next story, sir.
Good evening, Miss Elfinclint.
And with that, you sort of as you are you sort of getting up to leave.
And like maybe the reason why he's saying goodbye is like the nurses have walked in.
That's what I was about to say.
Up a position behind like her wheelchair or something like that. And like, I mean, they've let us jabber in here for hours, and it's evening mealtime,
right?
And he realizes like where he's at. Like, oh, please do take care.
Yeah, and with that, the nurses come up and it's like, oh, Ms. Elfinclint, we have a meal for you, and let us make up a bed for you. Why don't you stay here tonight instead of returning to your home? It's so cold and it's getting so dark. And she's like, oh dear, that would be lovely. Thank you so much. And they sort of guide her out of the room to, down the hall. And and with that, she's gone. And you're sort of left standing in the entrance to the ballroom. And I mean, people are, they've just sort of left you. They're not too concerned about you. So what would you like to do?
So I think he follows her back to the room.
Okay.
This is a little aside. And good evening, Miss Elfinclint. And he tells them, like, nurse, I remember the way back to the entrance. And like then like someone knocks over a tray or something like that. And as Lenny is laying down, he like bends down the threshold by the threshold of the door, and he does like a whole like salt line thing, just down, and then he walks out, and he'll start heading towards Council Silent Kreutz, which I'm sure like maybe she tells him where it's at or something.
Yeah, and it's also one of those things. It's like it's let me just see something really quickly. It's not hard to find. It stands out in so let me see what happens if I do this. There we go.
Yeah, nice. Oh.
So let me see if maybe I didn't do it here. What if I do this one? It's not going to be that different, but it's a little different, and it all depends on. I wish I could sort of say, okay, so if you go to, so you get to the outskirts of the castle. If you want to go to tactical mode really quickly.
Okay. Yep.
So that's the town of Uppsala. You can sort of see you are now here at, oh, sorry, not there. Where's number 4? Number 4 is up here. Sorry. That's Castle. I don't know how to say it. I don't know if it's Killenkreutz or Sillenkreutz, but that's the castle. You started at the asylum, which is
the
down
hospital
here.
Too?
Yeah,
oh,
so
okay.
that's where you sort of found her, and then you've made your way up here. Maybe given the hour, do you try and like flag down a coach or something, or do you just walk along the river even though it's getting a little late? And
I think he'll flag a coach, but even then it's still like maybe sunset by the time that he makes it to the castle.
Okay, perfect. And so you get to the castle, and again, it's the sun's just going down, and it's really starting to, the night's really taking a chill in the air. And, the gates are, if they were in better shape, they could still lock, but, parts of the iron have rusted. You look at the castle and like the fading light, and you can see that the center part of it by the front door, looks like it's functioning and stuff. But the further you sort of spread out from that door, the more decrepit it gets. The grounds get more decrepit as you go off to the sides. The buildings get more decrepit as you, climb up. And now the picture sort of shows lights on everywhere, but in reality, the lights are only on sort of in the front center part, and the rest feels almost
dark rooms.
Yeah, and like holes in the glass, and you see if like maybe there's holes in the roof. Like it's really in rough shape.
Okay.
And so again, the door, the gate is technically in a closed position, but you see like if you give it a good shove, you could probably push through.
Okay. So he'll push through, and he'll approach the main door. And obviously he's doing like the whole look around and stuff, but he's not creeped out or like alarmed or anything. And assuming nothing draws his attention, he'll approach the main door and give it a solid knock.
Okay. Yeah, you give it a good knock, and let me see. Yeah, you give it a good knock, and then after a moment, the door opens. And did I do this right? I don't know if I did this right. Let me just do something really quickly from here. We want to do this from here. We want to... Oh, now did it do it? Okay. This is interesting. See, there's so many things that I wish I could... Like, it doesn't help me that I can view it. I want to show it to you
right.
so that you can see what I'm doing. And I don't know how to do that. What's this? Did that do anything? Yeah, I'm not seeing anything on your end. Why is it not? Because I showed it there, but now let me... okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to do this.
Okay. Oh, yep, I see.
That's one way to do it. Okay. So the door opens and you see like this sort of bent over skeletal face open the door. And
right.
Even though you can see sort of behind him like some oil lamps and stuff, he's also carrying a lantern to help illuminate like things closer to him.
Sure, it's like right in my face too. Like
yeah, and maybe you're taken aback by just how bright it is. And he's sort of surprised. He's like, "Sir, good evening. Are you expected?"
Mr. Frisk, I presume. I do sincerely apologize and he pulls out his pocket watch. Calling on you at such a late hour, but I come bearing a message that I think you will find very interesting from your good friend, Miss Elfin Clint. Gosh, that's a hard name.
Yeah.
I have it written down 3 times in a row on my notepad, and I still like
right
trip on it.
Let me see something really quickly. I don't think. No, I can't. So, if you look on Matt's tab, you see he has journal and notes. So everybody has the ability to take their own notes in game. As a GM, the notes I take are kept secret, but I was trying to figure out if there's a way to share them, and it does not look like, at least immediately, that I can see that. So, anyway, so he sort of smiles at the name. And he's like, "Oh, Miss Elfin Clint." You can tell she's very dear to him.
Okay.
And he smiles at the name, and he's like, please come inside to the entrance here. At least get out of that brisk wind. Warm up just a little bit.
Oh, thank you, good sir. It is the weather is absolutely turning, but it is my favorite time of year. I tell you what, I have a wonderful recipe that involves spices that you'd often find in a pumpkin pastry, and you blend that with a hot cup of coffee, and it is, I'm sure it'll catch on.
How dare you? So What we've just discovered is that the origin of the fall of humankind.
Fucking Sweden, 1890.
Yeah. So yeah, he's like, oh, that sounds fascinating, but please come in. Why
Sounds fascinating, but I don't give two shits.
You're talking about pumpkin spice, goddammit. And with that,
and in the light, I see that he's wearing high calf boots with leggings tucked in and a flannel scarf.
And so he's like, sir, let me take your coat, warm up by the fire. And you can see he sort of brought you into like this grand entrance. But again, the room has some furniture. The furniture that's there is either covered in dust. It might be slightly broken. Some of it's still covered in sheets to keep the dust off. But there is a fireplace off to the side with a pretty roaring flame going. And maybe even though the room's mostly empty, you sort of see it's like a sofa, but like a style where like there's a lot of curves to the arms, and it's got the little curved feet that go. It's a little ornate, even though it's in sort of poor shape. And you can see sort of as it's pretty near the fire, so you could sit down and warm up. But you see that like the back of someone's head sitting on the couch, and so Mr. Frisk is like, oh please, let me take your coat, and and he takes it and he sort of folds it, and he walks sort of through a door and returns a moment later, and then on the table nearby he picks up like a small little bell, and he goes ding 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 ding, and he gives it a ring, and a moment later a maid comes walking into the room, and she's very proper, and she says, Mr. Frisk, you called for me, and he's like, yes, please, and he turns to you, he's like, tea to warm you up, something to eat.
Absolutely lovely. And I do not mean to be a bother, do not heat anything for me, but if you happen to have something prepared, I am quite famished.
And he's like, of course we do. And, Miss Hahn's daughter, the maid, she sort of gives a quick nod and goes through a separate door and disappears. And so then Mr. Frisk says, so, sir, Miss Elfinclint is very dear to me, and I'm so glad that she had a visitor today. And so I thank you for your kindness of checking in on her. How is she?
Oh, she is lovely. And I must thank you for accepting me in and allowing me to warm with you and to feed this and warm this hungry belly. I apologize for this, but is there somewhere private that we could speak? Any kind of like gestures towards? I assume I only see like the back of this head on the couch or something like that.
Yeah. And maybe the head's got a pipe going, so you sort of see the smoke.
Oh, nice.
But he's like, of course, sir, just follow me. And he sort of guides you into a room, and it's like a small study that doesn't get much use. It also has a fireplace, but the fireplace is not going,
So he'll make small talk about how Lenny was doing until Miss Hansdaughter brings in the tea and food.
Mm-hmm.
And then once it's in there, he'll say, now, to cut to the point, Mr. Frisk, I had a very interesting conversation with our friend Lenny. She was able to show me things, and he's watching Mr. Frisk's face the entire time.
And
I could feel that she still had high spirits.
And he's like, his face is sort of reactionless. He's like, oh, I more than understand what you're saying. And he says, in the castle,
you have a vase I could put these flowers in. Vase in.
And he's like, in there's no need for code or clandestine measures.
Well, that is a relief. Could I show you something?
He's like, oh, of course, sir.
And he reaches in his pocket and he pulls out the handkerchief, and the handkerchief is probably like a little like bloody now and like soaked through, and he opens it up to show what Lenny provided him.
So as you sort of did the whole thing, his face was completely stone, no reaction whatsoever. When he sees that, he's like, he for a flash, he's disgusted and taken aback. But then he tries to recover his composure. And then he gets sad. He gets visibly sad.
Oh. Mr. Frisk, I must confess this is not the reaction I expected. Our dear friend Lenny told me to come to you and show this to you based off all of our conversation. I thought this would be some kind of weirdly coded reassurance or something. I must confess I'm very confused.
And he says, no. It's not you, sir. Miss Elfinclint, I know what her intentions are with this gesture. But it's just a further reminder that even though she may have, flashes of her old self, she's truly not well, and that saddens me. But I know what she means by this symbolic gesture. It just saddens me that this is the state that she's in. And he's like, do you want me to dispose of that, sir? Do you want me to do anything with that?
My understanding was that it was for you. You must understand the situation I'm in. I ask that you do what you feel is appropriate with it, and hopefully you can shine a light on this puzzling situation I've been put into.
And he's like, that will be no problem. And he sort of takes it from you.
You see, Mr. Frisk, I like to write about strange tales. I don't know if you know. I'm just kidding.
I don't know if you know who I am.
Yeah, exactly.
So he sort of takes the handkerchief with the tooth and he sort of sticks it sort of gingerly in his pocket. And he says, wait a minute, where am I? No, there we go. He's like, Mr. Anderson, please enjoy your supper. And when you're done, find me in the next room and we can talk.
So Mr. Frisk leaves, and Ernest sits in this cold, dark, lonely study.
Maybe he left a lamp in there or something. So it's
right. Yeah, but it's like cold, and he's got like his lukewarm cup of tea and just some like some kind of like meat mince pie that's like is delicious but is cold, and he just like, I don't know, he just like looks around for a little bit. And you know what, actually, before he goes in the next room, I will look around like the study. I'll do a little bit of nosy Nellian around the study. And just like take a look in the room.
Give me, you want an observation or you want an investigation?
So I think it should technically be investigation. I think observation is more observation of people. That's rather true. Do observation, but I will do investigation.
Yeah, let's do investigation.
Oh, 2 successes.
2 successes. Okay. Yeah, what you sort of get, the room, there's nothing inherently like there's ghosts everywhere, but but the room, you start to look at the books and you start to realize, like, some of the, there's books of the occult, but then you start to see like some of them are kind of like from like old, like middle-aged scriptoriums, like some of these are quite old books of the occult. Nice. And there's like things from all over the world. You start to see some drawings. So it's sort of like this, it's not just like, like there's, Darwin's book on whatever. And that's, and there's like
Darwin's book on occultism.
Right. Darwin's book on Cthulhu and Plato's book on Cthulhu. It's not just like a highbrow library. You're starting to realize that it's sort of like this odd,
nice
eclectic collection.
I check to see if they have any of my works, any of my publisher works in this study?
You know what?
Like, I just gotta look, right?
The answer is yes.
Nice.
And what you see is on, what's that?
As they should.
It's front and center, right? And it's like I could sign it for them if they want.
I would stop it. I was gonna say I would take out a quill and sign it.
So what you do is you sort of see on the desk, like in the study, there's like a tied bundle of letters from Linny to the castle, and they're your stories, and she's been sending them to Mr. Frisk, sort of with like, and you see like an open letter saying like, this was the gentleman I was telling you about, and sort of saying like, I don't think these are just stories. And Mr. Frisk sort of didn't not look at them, but he sort of just made them into a pile and he set them aside, and he just didn't deal with them, if that makes sense.
Okay. I'm gonna pick them up and finish off my meat pie and pick up my cup of tea, and I'm gonna walk into the room with the fire where I assume Mr. Frisk is, and the other individual I couldn't see.
Yeah, so he's still sitting on the couch smoking a pipe. Mr. Frisk is, just doing something off the side. Miss Hansdaughter.
And he asked me to come in here, right?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So, is Hansdaughter in there? Miss Hansdaughter?
No, but you can hear her like through an open doorway, sort of like clank, clank, probably cleaning up the things she used to heat up your food.
Oh, okay. I told her not to heat it up. Oh my gosh. I walk in and I say, Mr. Frisk, again, your hospitality is unmatched. Taking in a stranger like me. Actually, it's curious. I suspect you know who I am. And he plops down the parcel with all the books and the letter. And I'm hoping, Mr. Frisk, you can enlighten me as to exactly what is going on here.
And so what you realize is that he might not have necessarily put it together when you first entered the room, but now that you've made the connection for him, he kind of goes, oh, you're the one that Mrs. Elphiclint was writing to me about. Oh my goodness, sir. Okay. And with that, the man on the couch, sort of turns around, and let me see if I can do this. Might not be able to do this. Okay. So the man on the couch turns around, and I don't know if you can see on the party tab on the far right.
Yeah.
Gertorn Osberg. Yes. Let me see if I can do this. Am I allowed to make you be able to play him? Can I share him with you? I don't know if I can or not. And I'm not going to worry about it too much now, but I thought there was a way that I could share him with you. But anyway, regardless, he sort of turns around for the first time because now he's realizing, he may have seen the letters as well. And nobody really put too much. They're not like, oh man, she's totally gone. Like maybe she was making coherent points and stuff like that. And, but the fact that it's all sort of come together maybe is not how these things turn out in the most recent times when dealing with Miss Elphiclint. And so, Gertorn Osberg, he stands up, and you can sort of see, he's sort of like a tall, lanky man, and he's older. If you had to guess, you would guess 50s, maybe almost as late as 60. Okay. And he stands up and says, well, Lenny's told us a little bit about you, but it's a pleasure to make your acquaintance. And he, offers his hand to shake.
Hi, Ernest Anderson.
It's like, yeah. I've enjoyed your stories. I've read a few of your stories, and they're quite enjoyable. I quite like them.
I appreciate that, Mr.
It's like, oh, apologies, Mr. Osberg.
Mr. Osberg, Mr. Frisk. Again, thank you both, but I suspect why Lenny may have been writing to you. Based upon our brief conversation this afternoon and the stories we shared with each other. So I assume, and I apologize for being so forward, that you are both gifted as well.
And, with that, Mr. Osberg, sort of sticks his pipe in his mouth and goes, and he just sort of steps aside and gestures and lets Mr. Frisk come up. And he's like, hey, Algot, why don't you fill this gentleman in? And,
Thank you, Mr. Osberg. Yes, Algot. Perhaps you'd like to fill me in. And he maybe with a little confidence, not trying to be rude, but he whips off like the dust cover to like an overstuffed armchair by the fire, and he plops down and he pulls out a pipe and he packs a smoke and it's quite late out there. I believe I have all evening.
And with that, Mr. Osberg sits down on the couch. Mr. Clint sits down next to him, and they're sort of, Osberg's still smoking his pipe, and behind you, Ms. Hahn's daughter, she goes into the room where you ate, and she starts collecting things and bringing them back behind you. So there's sort of this activity going on in the background. And Mr. Frisk says, well, I don't know what, Miss Elfinclint told you, but the castle here has been here in Uppsala for centuries. And many years ago, it became home to the stories you may have heard about. It became home to the society. But as you can tell from looking around, it's the best days of the society are well in the past. And Miss Elfinclint, was kind enough to take, the fortunes that she had, and she set up a trust that keeps this place barely standing. But, this is what our charge is. We've been asked to stay here at the castle and, to keep the doors open for potentially people like you.
We'll keep the light on.
Exactly. And he says, but, in all my, years, the only people who've shown up, and he sort of gestures to Mr. Osberg, well, and now you.
Well, I assume we all share a common trait, a common sight, based upon my conversation with Lenny. And I do say it is a sign of troubling times that so many people have lost touch with the old ways, the old traditions, lost touch, have lost their spirit.
And
but what is it exactly, besides residing in this castle and doing your best to keep it together, what is it exactly that you do?
Well, truthfully, we barely, as you were saying, keep the lights on. We aren't really able to do anything. Many of the people that once were part of this have long since died, or the ones that might still be alive may have gone insane, and we just don't hear from them anymore. Miss Elfinclint's predicament is not unusual for what happens to people with the sight. And he said, I should clarify, I don't want to mislead you. I do not possess the sight, and neither does Miss Hahn's daughter. We are sort of loyal employees, but
wow.
We are aware of everything, but we do not see what you and Mr. Osberg see.
That is some faith you have in these fantastical stories.
He's like, well, it's more faith in Miss Elfinclint. And with that, Mr. Osberg sort of gives a very solemn nod.
Ernest takes several drags on his pipe, and he's pondering there for a little bit. Gentlemen, this is all very interesting. And Mr. Rosberg, I possessing the site, I hope you share many of the same sentiments as myself and Miss Elfin Clint. But what is it exactly I can do for you?
And with that, he says, well, it's not what you can do for us. I think it's what you can do for everyone. You know, you and Mr. Osberg.
That's no small charge.
No, and what the society asks of people, even though it's in the state that it's in, is, as you said, no small charge. But it's more important now than ever. For everything that Miss Elfin Clint may say, she's not wrong when she talks about the danger that the world is developing. And we need the society now more than ever, but at the same time, as you can see, the society's in maybe its worst shape since its founding.
Mr. Osberg, Mr. Frisk, for the last 12 years, I have endeavored to share my stories in a way that people will enjoy and be willing to read about them. You see, if I just talk about spirits and creatures that go bump in the night that are as if they're real, people will ignore me. They'll write me off. And so I have done my part diligently to try and share my stories with the outside world. Now, many people would just write me off as a wild adventure author looking for a quick buck, but this is my way of sharing this part of us that so many of us have forgotten. And so you keep mentioning the society, but I feel as if I'm already doing my part. What more do you ask of me? What could I possibly do?
And with that, Mr. Osberg, Gerton Osberg, he sort of looks at you and sort of looks over at Mr. Frisk and then back at you and cracks a smile. And he says, well, Mr. Anderson, I think it might be time for you to get your hands dirty. And he sort of gives a nod to Mr. Frisk, and Mr. Frisk sort of gives a nod back. And Mr. Frisk says, you know, why don't you follow me? And
okay,
he starts
he'll follow.
Yeah. And so he starts you, you know, he takes you past the study, and it's down a hallway. And as you go past, you know, the room, some of the doors are just missing from the hinges entirely, and you can see inside, you know, pieces of broken glass or, you know, empty rooms that, you know, the furniture's been gone for quite a while. And eventually he takes you, you know, down a curve, and at the end of a hallway are these sort of the nicest looking doors in the whole building. For some reason, these doors have been kept intact, and he sort of takes a sort of a key out of his pocket, and he twists the lock, and he gives it a sort of a grand push, and he says, just stay here for a minute. You know, this room's not empty like the others. And he goes around and he starts lighting lamps around the room. And it's like, whew. And as this one lights, you can just see all of a sudden it's like floor to ceiling bookshelves. And then the next one, whew, it's another floor to ceiling bookshelf. And it goes around the room. And suddenly you see you're in this massive library. And he's like, he looks around and he's like, you know, sir, this is, you're an author, you're a writer, so maybe you might be able to appreciate this, but not much of the society has survived except for this so far. And what you're seeing here is the collected works, the collected knowledge that we were able to sort of, as the society collapsed and crumbled around Scandinavia, this is what we were able to sort of collect and save and centralize in the hopes that someday the society might be able to rebuild, and this might be the start of its foundation. You know, we didn't want to lose this knowledge we have accumulated over the years. And he said, if you want to be a part of this, if you want to help us, you know, you'll have me, you'll have Mr. Osberg, Miss Hansdaughter, and all the knowledge that we were able to save at your disposal to do what we can in these hard times.
So he's like walking down the shelves, right? And he's like running his fingers down the books, and he pulls a couple off, and like I imagine it's like partial like treatises on like real life events, but maybe there's like ancient versions of fairy tales, right? Like Grimm's fairy tale, but like something before the first edition, right? That like, oh, this is like the source of all these fairy tales.
It's like an accounting of instead of.
Yeah. And he's this is amazing. This is remarkable. This is like nothing I've ever seen, but you keep saying, you say help you be part of this. Again, like, how could I help you? I could read these books, absolutely. I could get lost in this room for years, but...
And as you say that, you realize that, Mr. Osberg sort of trailed behind you, and he sort of arrives at the doorway and leans against the threshold. And he's like, no, like I said, it's time to get our hands dirty. We have to go out there. And we need to start helping people, and we need to start helping the Vaesen and figuring out why these odds are developing that are putting lives in danger on both sides.
People? Vaesen? Is it dangerous?
Oh, it might be very dangerous.
Does it pay well?
Absolutely not.
Will I report to anyone?
He looks around. He's like, only if you talk to yourself.
So we look into Vaesen incidents. We help people. We report. We document. We catalog.
Mm-hmm.
We study them.
And he gives a nod.
Interact with them.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I imagine like every time there's a nod, like this is just like he's, he pulls out a book and then he asks, and then he pulls out a book and then he's asked, because like, and he probably, he gets where this is going.
And then
Mr. Osberg,
sorry, go ahead. Sorry.
Mr. Frisk, look at me. My work is done with fountain pen, and I don't know if typewriters existed by now or not, and printing press.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a master of words. I must say, what you present to me is thrilling, is fascinating, is so intriguing, is beyond my wildest. It's what I've done for the last dozen years as I travel around Sweden and over to Finland, and I've even heard rumors of the Isles of Britain. But to dedicate all of my time to this is very peculiar.
Well, then have it your way. Have a good night. Have a good life, and adventures over. No. And Mr. Osberg sort of looks at you for a moment, and he says, "Well, maybe it's time that you're the hero of your own story." And I'm not saying you can't. You can't. I'm not going to stop you from writing down, what you see. You're gonna like a lot of your stories. I know they were inspired by the truth, but imagine what your stories could be.
More than you will ever know, Mr. Osberg. By the way, how do we spell that? Just so
and he's like, just imagine what your stories could be if you really got to know what was going on.
Yeah, but how does this all work? Do we put out a wanted ad? Like, is your heart spirit bothering you?
He's like, well, it's I'll be honest, it's, as you can see, it's lean times, and we don't know what the first step is going to be, but things have a way of presenting themselves, much like the Vaesen.
You say that the society existed before and has fallen into ruin. I assume there is some sort of framework we could follow, perhaps.
And he's like, oh yeah, somewhere in here there's old charters of how they used to structure the society. Yes, absolutely.
I will say, we'll have to make some improvements to this place.
And he's like, well, I mean, with the coin that your stories bring in, I bet we probably could afford it.
Yeah. Well, We may have to find more lucrative ventures, but I'm sure we could put you to work. And he pats Mr. Frisk, who probably has like been home at this castle for like 50 years or something. I don't know.
Right. Nice. And so there's like, so, sir, like, despite the presentation of many of the rooms here, we do have some spare guest rooms here if you would like to stay. Also, we would take no offense if we could call you a coach and have you go to the inn here in town.
Gentlemen, I am a purveyor of the odd, of the unknown. I live a comfortable life thanks to my dear friend, who has seen to my upbringing and my education since my family's demise so long ago. It's only been like 15 years. I am afforded luxuries that I understand most are not. I'm able to travel around Sweden. I'm able to do things at my own leisure. I can write about what I want to write about, the weirdest, most bizarre things that you and I both know are true, but the others do not. I have a very comfortable life that affords me all of the things that I could ever want, probably. And when my friend passes away, even beyond what I could ever want. But nothing intrigues me more than potentially having a closer and deeper bond with the Vaesen. And he extends a hand. I don't know who's like, I don't know who he's perceiving to be the leader, but
right. Osberg takes it, and then Mr. Frisk takes it as well.
Oh my gosh! Stop.
Not like a, but like they each shake your hand in turn, I should say. But it would be funny if they're like
society on 3.
1, 2, society. No, 3. Are you going to say 3 or is it on 3? And with that, Mr. Frisk says, "So, should I make you a room or should I call you a coach?"
Mr. Frisk, you'll find that my bags were already at the doorstep. I don't know, like he'll say something like witty like that, like
yeah,
he already showed up with his bags.
Nice. And so yeah, he so Mr. Frisk sort of like spins on his heels and starts walking away. And as he's walking away, you sort of hear him call out, "Miss Hahn's daughter, we're going to have an extra guest tonight. I'll start making up the room if you can start warming the bed, with the they put the coals in the tray, the bed warmer."
Yeah, right.
And I'll air out the room really quick. And he sort of trails off, and Mr. Osberg, sort of stands, he's still leaning against the jam, smoking his pipe. And he sort of gives you a nod, and he's like, I'm glad you're taking this chance.
Mr. Osberg, something tells me I will be glad as well, that these will be adventures that perhaps part of me lives to regret, but deep down, I hope the stories that unfold and the understanding we develop. In short, Mr. Osberg, I look forward to working with you. Mr. Osberg has the site, right? Like, that's what I pieced it. Like, he said he had... Yeah, right.
Yeah. And with that, he says, and I think it's going to be a pleasure working with you. I hope we both live long enough to regret it. And he sort of, with that, gives it a nod, and he's like, I'll see you in the morning. And he starts heading off.
And then it's like, Ernest turns around, like in this room with like the lights all lit up. And it's just like, it pans to like him, just like looking at all the shelves, just like taking it all in.
So let me ask you a question. Does he sleep that night? Does he go to his room and retire?
No, he does. Well, not for a long time.
Okay.
So he'll pour some sherry, and he starts to journal like furiously, which is one of the most important things and he documents everything, and he has this great like self-reflection, and he caps it off with like, I don't know, something like, maybe not philosophical is the right word, but a rhetorical question that he's only asking himself, like, or will this undertaking prove to be my final ruin, or like something overly dramatic like that. Yeah. And then I'll like leave it off with a ...
Very nice. Okay. So at some point, you retire for the night. Is it like the light starting to come up and then you realize, oh crap, I better get to bed? Or is it, you give it some time, but let's not be crazy.
No, it's against time. Yeah, he has a good amount of sherry and journals, and I don't know, maybe he like pulled off I don't know, like just one of the fairy tale collections, right? One of the folklore collections or something like that. And so he spent some time reading, but eventually he does go to sleep.
Okay. Okay. So yeah, so you retire for the night. The room, it doesn't disappoint. Again, as much as the rest of the house is in bad shape, it was true. The guest room is quite nice. You have sort of like this feather bed. It's quite warm despite the chill outside. And yeah, so in the morning, nobody wakes you. It's sort of almost like they were aware that you might have stayed up a little late and you might have had a little bit to drink. So they give you your time and space to wake up in the morning. And, when you wake up, Mr. Frisk is like, oh, good morning, sir. Good morning. Something to eat.
Ah, yes. Will others be joining me?
And he says, no, Mr. Osberg, stepped out. He needed to collect some things for the castle, just supplies that we need to keep the day-to-day going.
Well, I insist you don't set a place for me. Perhaps I could take my meal back in the kitchen to not be too much trouble. Maybe in the warmth of the hearth.
And he's like, oh, of course, Miss Hansdaughter. We can arrange that, absolutely. And he started ting 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 ting, and explains to her what to do, sort of in a whisper, and she sort of spins on her heels and goes to take care of it.
Miss Hansdaughter, please, you can. Of course, you're welcome to join me. You don't have to. Like, maybe she gets the food and she starts to leave. And I know I'm encroaching on her space and probably Mr. Frisk's space, but right. Please, you're both welcome to be here.
And she's like, oh no, thank you, sir. I've already eaten, and I'll give you your privacy. And she, is very, very.
I insist, Miss Hansdaughter. I am no sir, and you are always welcome to do whatever you need around me. I need no privacy, and plus we are not alone. And then he goes through the ritual of he breaks off some of the bread and he leaves it right up against the hearth.
And with that she sort of
he says please, if you could do me this, if you could humor me this one thing, but the scraps I leave here, please just let them be. I assure you they'll take care of themselves.
Right, and that's when you do that, she sort of has a flicker of recognition, like maybe her mother did the same thing or something similar, or her grandmother, and maybe she hasn't seen it in a while, and she sort of understands what you're doing and why, and off in the distance, you sort of hear like a ding-a-ling-a-ling-a-ling, like the bell of the front door, and so you're in the kitchen, you're eating, and you hear the door open and some words that are muffled, like two people speaking. And the door closes, and a few minutes pass, and you're continuing your meal. And after a moment, Mr. Frisk, he comes in, carrying sort of like a silver tray, and on the silver tray is a letter, and the letter is sealed with like this crimson wax, and he just sort of lays it down in front of you and says, "Sir, this isn't directly addressed to you, but I think it may be for you and Mr. Osberg."
Shall I wait for Mr. Osberg, or?
He's like, no, you're more than welcome to open it if you choose.
Mr. Frisk, please, no more of the sir. You can call me Ernest. I understand you may have had a wait, but again, I am no sir. I am a guest here in your home. And he cracks open the seal.
And Mr. Frisky sort of nods and says, "It will be it's old habits. It's how I've been trained. So it may be difficult if you can,
of course,
if you can, beg your pardon when I'm not super polite." And he sort of like nods and sort of steps away. And Miss Hansdaughter, as you're opening the letter, she steps out as well and leaves you to the letter. And you open it. And what you see is Now, how did that pop up for you? Was it in the handouts or did it pop up
I
on
saw
the
it
screen?
pop up. So I had handouts. I had already handouts already up over on the right.
Okay.
The trackers, and
Got
I saw it load in, so I just clicked it.
Got it. Okay. And so you can see it's sort of written by hand, and it says The Dance of Dreams. Or actually, why don't you read it?
The Dance Dreams, a shadow play of horror, murder, and revenge. And he kind of laughs, and he like looks around and realizes there's no one else around. Let yourself be enraptured and terrified by shadow theater with clockwork as amazing as that of the master's construction on the continent. Watch as evil smiles, good people go to their doom, and spirits come to life. Follow Oscar Hjort's encounter with the Black One, his struggle, and finally the betrayal which claimed his life. Hear the runes of the enchanted flute that sends souls dancing to hell. The show will premiere shortly at the Witch Cat Inn, not for the faint of heart. Meet me at the Witch Cat Inn. Signed, Klaus. Olas. Who's Olas? Do I recognize that name?
Tonight at the Witch. You do not. And you can see, from the note that the most of the notice is written one way, but the Meet Me Tonight at the Witch Cat Inn is written in a different handwriting.
Right.
And we will fade to black there.
Okay. Nice. Awesome.
There we go. All right. Oh, it wasn't...
we need a ghost.
Yeah, so yeah, we'll I guess we'll pick this up the next time we have a one-on-one session when Patrick's not around. I feel like this, I don't know, neither of us were super familiar with alchemy, but I feel like we sort of picked around it as we needed to.
Yeah, I mean, we didn't have to do a lot. I mean, you were doing way more with scene transition and that type of thing. But, I mean, all I had to do was roll. And I tested out rolling beforehand. It's not immediately clear. Like, you click a skill, then it's test instead of, like, roll, which is kind of weird. But I just didn't have to do much, and I just happened to have the right thing up. So
Nice.
That was good. That was awesome stuff.
Very nice. Yeah, and, not to get too deep in it, I thought Vaesen was... not bad so far. I like the the world.
I'm super intrigued. I'm very interested in it. Yeah. I really like it. Yeah.
Nice. Another banger from Free League.
Yeah, imagine that.
All right, so I guess, with that, we'll thank you again if you're checking this out on YouTube. Like and subscribe. If you prefer audio versions of our actual plays or our RPG discussion podcasts, where we can be found at Black Lodge Trivia Night, wherever you get your podcast, just search for that. If you want to leave likes and reviews, that also helps. But otherwise, thank you very much for checking this out, and we'll have some more. we'll be rebooting the origin story of Otari pretty soon, and we'll be doing some more Vaesen in the future.
Yeah, we will.
Matt, thanks very much for checking this out, and I really appreciate it. It's a lot of fun.
For running something new. I'm enjoying this a lot so far. That was a really good introduction session. Very interested to see where it goes and like see how an adventure like really plays out. It's gonna be cool.
It's gonna be a letdown. I know what happens. No, but this was a lot of fun, and I really appreciate it, Matt.
Yeah, awesome.
All right.
Good night, everyone.
Good night. Thank you.